Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another session of the Leeds Kindness Revolution, Festival of Kindness, Compassion and Wellbeing. And we're sorry that we're a little bit late starting. As you'll appreciate, there's always a little technical glitches that arise. We're still waiting for one of our panelists to re-enter the Zoom room because she had problems with sound before, but we will be starting in a few moments. I'll just introduce myself. I'm David Midgley. I teach at the Jamyang Buddhist Centre in Leeds, and I've been part of the team that's been working on creating this Festival of Kindness, Compassion and Wellbeing for the last 2.5 years. So I'm really excited to be here with you on this call. It's a very personally important issue to me, and I think it's a very important issue for everyone. I'd like to introduce my colleague on this, Courtney Brady. She's been coordinating the events for today. Courtney, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Courtney. I've been a part of the Kindness Revolution team since November last year, and I've been working with the wonderful team that's been putting on these great events throughout the week that you might have seen or are still to come, and this event that's on this evening. So I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to join us tonight. This is again a really important topic close to my heart as well. So yeah, I'd just like to thank everyone. I'd like to thank all the panelists that have joined us as well, and hopefully we can have a really informative and honest discussion this evening.
Great, thank you, Courtney. So in a moment, what we're going to do is we're going to hear from each of the panelists and also a little bit from Courtney and myself, because we both have a personal involvement in these issues, as you will hear. And then after you've heard from everyone, then it's going to be really pretty much over to you. There will be a short session in breakout rooms. So you'll be speaking with a couple of, I think there's going to be groups of 3 is the plan, for about 10, 15 minutes perhaps. Malcolm Stern will be leading that, and we'll hear from Malcolm in a moment. I just want to say a couple of things before we start. Firstly, some of you may be on this call and it may be, a very immediate issue for you, and you may have immediate concerns. And several of the panelists represent organizations that are able to offer help in this area. So I'm going to ask them all to put those contact details in the chat if, you've got immediate issues that you want to talk to somebody about. I know they have already done that, but what I realize is that you don't see things that come in the chat before you enter the room. So I'm going to have to ask them all to do it again. I'm sorry about that.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Heather, who is helping us with the hosting, is going to do that. So you will see all those details in the chat. If you have questions for the panel, you can also put those into the chat box during the, the talks or afterwards. After the breakout session, then there will be about an hour for an open discussion, and we're really keen to hear your questions and your contributions and observations about the issues of loneliness, depression, and suicide, how they've affected you personally or other people, or just your general ideas on that or your questions. At the moment, we are recording the session, and we will record the contributions of all of the panelists and so on. The breakout conversations will not be recorded. And the question and answer session, the discussion session after that, we would like to record it, but we appreciate that some people may not want their contributions recorded. If you don't want your contribution recorded, then please write that in. You can put a chat message to myself or Courtney, or to Heather or Angela at Kinder Leeds, all the ones with Kinder Leeds. You can put a message saying, I would like my contribution to be removed from the recording, okay? If anyone here is just totally unhappy with being recorded, then please feel free to say that, and we will respect that, because we feel it's really important that we, are sensitive to how people feel about that issue, and we don't want to impose it on anybody. We would rather hear you feel free to say whatever is in your mind, in your heart, and not feel that you have to be part of a recording. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I think I'm going to call on each of the panelists in turn, and each person's going to speak for about 7 minutes. So it'll be a chance for you to hear more than just a name and an organization, but what is their respective involvement in this work, and what is your personal experience, what are your what things do you have to offer for people to help understand or to deal with these issues, a little bit about your organization, perhaps, if that's relevant, and over to you. Could I call on Andy Langford first to tell us a bit about himself and his work?
Super. Thank you, David. I just want to say it's a real pleasure to be here this evening. Thank you so much for the privilege of allowing me to come in. And hello, everyone. Thanks for your time this evening. So I'm Andy Langford. I'm the Clinical Director for Cruse Bereavement Care. So I'm part of the national organisation based in London, but we have a thriving branch in Leeds. I've visited there a few times. Just really impressed by the work everyone's doing in the sector, really. I've been involved with in the voluntary sector for over 22 years now. Trained as a counsellor and cognitive behavioural therapist and life coach, and I also train particularly around suicide risk management and support after suicide. So I train clinicians in that area too, and also have some professional and personal experience of suicide in my family, and also suicide with friendship groups, and as I say, in sort of professional practice. It's a thing that's really close to my heart. And at Cruse Bereavement Care, we offer support for people who've experienced bereavement, and that's of many types. And certainly, one of the things that drew me to the organisation was the work that we've been doing about suicide and around loneliness too. And what I think what we're finding in the current environment of COVID-19, are we locked down in some places? Are we not? The whole sort of level of uncertainty, the difficulty around trusting what the future might hold, lack of choice as well, can bring about sort of immense pain for people. And certainly what we continue to experience is folk coming to us, whether it's through our local services or whether it's through our national helpline, and indicating that they're finding things increasingly difficult. So the level of loneliness, chronic loneliness, we're finding are increasing. And also we continue to work with people who are feeling very anxious and very suicidal. And it's a real privilege to do so. But what I wanted to turn to as well was just the examples of hope we see, and I know often the word resilience is sort of used, but a sense of folk being able to pick themselves up and go again for life, And I remember coming we have someone whose story they're happy to share, fun for me to share rather, is a lady who was actually bereaved a good few years ago of someone very close to her in her family. And she thought she'd sort of, in inverted commas, dealt with the bereavement that she'd experienced. But over this season, over this sort of period of things being locked down in late March and so forth, she'd found herself increasingly isolated at home. And that was when the feelings associated with the grief, the loss, the increased anxiety, the real lowness of mood, what she'd describe as depression, was hitting her. And she tried to very much push those away, just in an attempt to deal with life, deal with her family, look after her kids, look after her relatives. And what she was starting to experience, I don't know whether you've ever found this, is the immense pain that grief brings and loneliness brings. And I do talk about emotional pain, but the visceral physical pain, and the physical pain that grief and that loneliness brings, the sort of sharp gnawing of stomach, and that thing we describe as heartbreak is very real. And just reading through a story and listening to her, you hear how through supporting others and supporting and getting support herself, she's been able to sort of talk through how she's been feeling as a result. And in doing so, that pain has been able to be expressed. It's transferred from something that's very, very physical to something that's verbal. And whilst that's not been an easy thing by any stretch, what we've seen is that sort of real resilience in searching for a way to express how she's felt. And in doing so, and in sharing, and in helping others who have also had similar experiences, she's found that pain it's not gone away, and the grief hasn't gone away. The memories haven't gone away of the person who's died. But what has happened is the rawness of it's got to a point where she's been able to cope, and she's been able to find more meaning in what's going on for her in her life. And that just for me spoke of someone who's sort of soldiering on and pushing on through, and how it's difficult, but also how there is hope and how there is possibility. So thanks, David. That's me.
Thank you very much, Andy. It's really great to have you on this call, and thank you very much for making the time, because I know that your schedule is horrendously busy. So thanks very much. Okay, so could I now ask Annette if your audio is working? I'm going to unmute you, so you don't have to worry about that. See if you can come in now. You should be. No. Yeah. Hello, Annette. Can you hear us? Can you speak? You're logged in twice. Not sure what's happening there. Okay, Annette, we'll have a quick conversation with you behind the scenes, and I'm going to ask Surinder now to come into the conversation. Can you unmute yourself and we'll hear from you?
Hi everyone, my name's Surinder. I work for the Leeds and West Yorkshire Suicide Bereavement Service. So we support people after a suicide. That can be families, friends, colleagues, that can be anyone who has been impacted by the suicide of someone. The service is unique in the way that it's peer-led, so all of us that work or volunteer for the service have been bereaved by suicide. We're not trained counsellors, it is peer-to-peer support. And I guess that made a difference for me, because I lost my dad to suicide 12 years ago. And as you know that those first few years can be quite difficult, it can be quite lonely, it can be quite scary, especially if you haven't had people that have gone through the same thing. And what the service did for me, I started as a group user, as a service user, then volunteered and have worked my way up. And what the service has done for me, and what that support has done for me, is given me hope, empowerment, it's given me focus, it's given me it's helped change the meaning of my grief. And people often ask, would you have changed the things you've gone through? And I can say no, because if I hadn't have lost my dad, I wouldn't be doing this work. I wouldn't be working with families or individuals around loss like this. Yeah, so that's me, I guess, in a nutshell.
Thank you very much, Surinder. Okay, can we go now to Malcolm Stern?
Yep. Hi everybody, it's very good to be here. It's been a pretty crazy day for me so far. I did a piece on Sky News this afternoon around suicide prevention, and I was deeply moved, and I had to really hold back my tears. So in 2014, my daughter Melissa took her own life, and it actually turned my whole life around into so many different ways. I had a phone call from Bridget Bowen from Compassion and Mental Health some months after that, asking if I'd be interested in helping present at the Compassion and Mental Health gatherings, which are held in Wales, and they're a wonderful resource for people who are dealing with all sorts of mental health issues. Now, Bridget had no idea that I'd been bereaved by suicide and was inviting me because she knew I was a facilitator. And I thought that I was going along to Compassion and Mental Health to educate people. And what I realized is that I was actually being educated, because the deep stories of people who have been through mental health issues and who've been through suicide and bereavement is so educational. The resources that they've drawn on. I'm really happy to see my friend Andy Bradley here tonight, who I spoke to earlier today, and who's been a real inspiration for me around the whole area of mental health. And so I was initially sort of knocked for six by my daughter's suicide, but I came to realize after a while that, number one, that my practice as a psychotherapist had changed, and that actually I was able to go with people to the much more dark places that were around for them. And I went there without fear, and it was quite something to actually go, I've been there, and therefore I can travel with you. So that was profound for me in my work as a psychotherapist. And about 2 years ago, I came up with the idea of writing a book about Melissa's legacy to me, and what I'd learned and what were the resources that I'd drawn on. I realized I'd actually had a number of resources that I'd drawn on over the years, that were simple practices, that were actually ways in which we could resource ourselves and be able to be resilient in the face of tragedy. So the book is coming out this month. It's called Slay Your Dragons with Compassion. I'm sorry about the advertising break, but the book has actually been extraordinary for me. And while I was working on this book with my friend Ben Craig, who helped me write it, I said to him at one point, it wouldn't matter if no one ever read it. And it never got published, because actually what I have got from this is a cathartic way of dealing with my own loss. And I realized, and this has been coming through in lots of conversations I've had with people and dialogues in other spaces, is that actually the place of creativity in dealing with loss and dealing with suicide and dealing with all of these things is extraordinary. And that actually, if we can find creative ways of living out and doing what we can do, then there's something profound in that. So I strongly recommend people look up compassionandmentalhealth.co.uk. I'll write that down. And I'll also write down the name of my book, which I'm really proud of. I've written 2 other books, but this is the first book where I feel like I've landed something of real value. And when I speak about it, I feel like I'm speaking about something that is an instruction manual. I realize it's an instruction manual for myself, but it's also an instruction manual for others who are dealing with the same thing. So I'm very grateful to be welcomed here today. I'd met David before at one of the gatherings and had a profound meeting. Yeah, I hope to see some of you maybe at Compassion Mental Health and at other places. So thank you very much. David, back to you.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. I just want to say a personal tribute to Malcolm, because that conversation with Malcolm took place in a workshop on telling our stories, and it took place about 3 months after my wife's death from suicide. And it was one of the most cathartic and profound experiences that I have, and I'm deeply grateful to Malcolm for his really skillful facilitation of that workshop and all the work that you're doing, Malcolm, and the poignant story that you yourself told about Melissa. So I really remember that with great heartfelt warmth. So it's lovely to have you here with us tonight. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to ask Rich Powell now to tell us a little bit about your work, Richard.
Hi, thanks for having us, and thanks for Courtney for the invite as well. Yeah, my name's Rich Powell. I work with my wife. She has a company called We Are Inclusive Minds, and together we educate and train people in the mental health first aid arena, from across the adult and youth spectrum, to spread the message and reduce the stigma around mental health awareness and mental well-being. And part of that education area is suicide, and getting people to help to get them to understand and hopefully see the signs that could hopefully create an intervention to potentially prevent somebody from taking their own life. From a personal experience, I'm a 45-year-old man. I've worked in financial services all my working life, but as far as I know and can remember, I've suffered with mental ill health. I sort of can take this back to probably back into the days of when I was a teenager, which is where current form most of mental illness starts, and carries on through into adulthood. For the last seven years, I've been managing that, and effectively this is what sort of led me to join up with my wife to sort of to help train people, and help spread the word about being mentally unwell is fine and acceptable in itself, and that we reduce that stigma. It's just effectively the same as being physically unwell. Through personal experience of sort of suffering from depression and anxiety, I have a sort of a connection with people who we train, and it's a key thing for me in that training is about reducing the stigma so people can talk about what they're going through, and feel confident to talk about what issues they may have, but also to help people to understand that, you know, listening is a key point of that. It's to be able to listen to someone non-judgmentally, or just to sometimes not even response, just to be an ear can be absolutely crucial help for some people. And on a personal note, I know several people who have taken their own lives, and sadly, even though you sort of have the training that I have, it's the shock is still real. I've not had a loss of a close relative, but still that shock and sort of, I suppose initially that self-anger of why didn't I see that, what is just is still as strong in myself, even though that those individuals were acquaintances rather than sort of close family members. I think that's me in a nutshell as well.
Thank you very much, Richard. All these stories are really, really poignant. It's clear that everybody, and I think it probably applies to most people actually, that we all have had a close experience of someone that has taken their own life, and it is, it's really one of the most difficult things to deal with. I'm afraid we do have some technical problems with the sound for Annette, so we're trying to get some technical help on that. But in the meantime, I think it would be nice also if we could hear a little bit from Courtney and myself, as we both have stories to tell about it. Courtney, would you like to say a little bit about what makes this a really special conversation for you? I'll just ask that.
Yeah, well, for me, the conversation is really important because I've suffered with post-traumatic stress for I think about 6 years, but I lived with it undiagnosed for around 4. And it was from a real misunderstanding and education around mental health. I lived with what I thought was depression and anxiety, and it wasn't until I went out and did my own real research into the other elements that come with that anxiety disorder, like night terrors and triggers and flashbacks. And I had been living that way for 4-5 years maybe, and not really understanding what I was going through. And like I say, it wasn't until I did my own research that I truly started to understand myself. And it was once I started to understand myself that I could take those steps forward to try and figure out how I could heal and what I could do and what I needed to do in order to help myself from that position. I had attempted to take my own life at the age of 14. I've lived with traumatic experiences for a major part of my life, and what's helped me throughout all of this is conversation. It is being honest. It is talking to people and being in those safe spaces where you don't feel judged and you can say, certain words. Some days for me are completely fine. Some days they're really not. And it's having that level of understanding in the circles around you. But that doesn't come if you don't talk to the people around you. You need to let them in as well. And I think that's what I'd really like to add to this conversation is just if anyone is feeling any level of any distress, it's to reach out, whether that to be to someone whether to be to anyone who's on this call from any of the resources that anyone's put into the chat. It's so important, because I've seen a quote a couple of times where I would much rather sit and listen to someone and listen to all of their anguish than to be at that person's funeral. So yeah, that's why it's important to me, because I do know people who have taken their own lives, unfortunately, and I know how close you can get to that situation as well. And it's not a matter of desperation sometimes, it is just a matter of having a really bad day, and it could stem of just waking up on the wrong side of the bed to them being greeted miserably by someone in the street, and that snowball that then continues from that can really lead to this build up, as you can see me getting in myself now. But I'm proud to talk about it, I'm proud to be open, and I'm proud to have the conversations around it, because if I didn't, I might not be here now. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Courtney, and I'm proud to be doing this with you. Yeah, I'm just looking at the situation now. We are getting some technical help for Annette, but in the meantime, maybe I'll just say...
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Annette. Okay, yes, please. Okay,
Oh,
okay.
gosh, at
Yeah.
last.
It must be very stressful for you.
I am so sorry about that. I don't know what
it's great.
happened.
We've got you now. That's what we want. So relax, just chill. Do you want to take a breather, and I'll say my bit, and then we'll come to you next.
Thank you. Yes, I am a bit stressed now.
All right, you just take it easy and breathe, and we'll be back to you in a few minutes. All right, thanks so much. All right, okay. I think I need to just probably spotlight myself on the video so that you can see me on the recording. And it's a bit dark in here, so sorry for the sake of the recording. Put some lights on. Okay, so yeah, good evening again, everyone. And my story, the main reason why I'm here tonight, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why I'm involved in the Compassion Festival, the Kinder Leeds Festival, but particularly this particular conversation, as I think I've already mentioned, my wife Susan took her own life just over 2 years ago. And previous to that, I had spent 18 months with her going through the horrendous roller coaster of bipolar depression. Supposedly, I mean, she was diagnosed as bipolar, but I want to say, I'm going to say a few things. I don't believe that she was bipolar. She was certainly subject to depression, but the frightening swings between extreme depression and being manically high that she experienced, I think they were pharmacologically caused. It was the antidepressant medication that she was on that led to her having an absolutely traumatic time for 1.5 years. Now, the trauma had been caused before that. So one of the dimensions of my grief that I want to openly acknowledge is I feel an extremely heavy degree of responsibility for Susan's death. And I think that's probably a very common feeling among people who have had someone close to them pass away from suicide. And I think it's usually unjustified. But in my case, a lot of people have tried to sort of persuade me that it's unjustified, but I know that it's not. And that's something that I have to live with. And it's only occurred to me recently because I kind of felt like, well, I'm this very, unique situation where everyone says, oh, you mustn't blame yourself, and they don't know. Actually, no one else knows, that the truth about that other than me. However, be that as it may, what I've realized recently is that I'm sure I'm not the only person for whom that's true. And I don't know how I will get to meet people who've been through the same experience, who feel responsible for the death of a close, of a partner. Losing your spouse is, I can't imagine, I have no idea what it's like to lose a child to suicide. I can't speak to that. But to lose the person who is the most important person in the world to you, the person that you chose to share your life with, is a heavy blow. And there must be people who have had that experience and who have a reason to feel that they carry a load of responsibility. Susan was a vulnerable person. She was someone who was subject to this. But I know that if I had not done the actions that I did, that what happened would not have happened. So I have to carry that. She had a previous suicide attempt. I knew that. But anyway, I don't want to dramatize this excessively, and I don't want people to be feeling sorry for me, because actually my life at the moment is truly wonderful in many ways. I do experience this grief from time to time. I went through it intensively for at least 1 year, but now it's in the background of my life, and the foreground of my life is that everything I'm doing is connected with compassion. That's my whole life. And it's the most fulfilling and rewarding thing that I could possibly be doing. So it's especially, significant for me to be in this conversation with the rest of the panel here, and the rest of the audience. Have had some remarkable communications from people already today about this, and I feel extremely privileged to be here now with you all. And I just want to say I feel my heart is open right now to all of you, and thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here and for being part of this. So if I can call on Annette now, if you would like to say a few words, and thank you so much for hanging in there and coming back, and thanks again for being here.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's been really powerful listening to some of the personal stories, and I'm really, really honoured to be here. I suppose I'm here really because I think that I lead on the BME Hub, which is a voice and influence network, and we had some discussions around Black and minority ethnic communities not having those discussions about suicide, about mental health, about the journey that sometimes people are on, and recognising there's a lot of trauma in a lot of Black and minority ethnic communities that's goes unrecognised. I've known people in my own personal life who have taken their lives, friends of mine, and it's never been talked about, was never discussed, and even now it's still a really difficult subject to touch on. Even simple depression isn't a discussion that's had easily. So I suppose I'm really here to share with you all that I feel that this is an important platform, an opportunity to have those discussions and to share with each other, and to understand, I suppose, really, that without people talking about it and connecting, then it becomes more and more difficult to understand it and to know what to do about it or how to support somebody. And I just feel it's really becoming more and more important with the death of George Floyd and others, and people seeing those things and the trauma that causes for young Black people particularly, that is an issue. My sister works with young people who have mental health issues, and it's becoming a bigger problem. There's been evidence to show that during this COVID-19 lockdown, that mental health has increased, and in particular communities, it's become more prevalent, whereas it wasn't there before, or it wasn't discussed. So I do feel that this is a great opportunity really to have those discussions and to have an open and honest discussion about the reality of what it is, and suicide, mental health, and all those things. And in our communities, I want to have those discussions more. I want us to be able to feel confident to talk about it and it not be a stigma. So thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Annette, very much indeed. It's a really special pleasure and privilege to have you with us tonight. And I think, you know, I hope that we can continue to explore ways to get this issue more on the radar and open conversations about it and get action and raise awareness about this. So I know this is a week-long festival, but it is not just a week-long festival. We will be here long-term, and we want to make this issue of, you know, of all the issues around, you know, the problems of the Black and minority ethnic groups in this city and in the world. We want to make them central to our work. So thank you so much for being with us tonight. Okay, so we're going to, in a moment, we're going to go into small groups of 3, and Malcolm is going to lead us into that. It may take a minute or two to get all those groups ready, so allow a bit of time. But Malcolm, do you want to introduce that exercise for everyone? But before we do that, sorry, has anyone got any sort of important questions of a practical nature, anything you need to say or need to ask at this point, or any, you know, really burning questions you want to ask the participants that are going to get forgotten before we come back to the Q&A? You can use your virtual hand raise or just raise your hand physically. Okay.
David, can I just quickly mention something? As you were talking, it just reminded me. So the Suicide Bereavement Service has started running a number of groups. So one's for parents, one's for siblings, one's for child loss, and there's a partners loss group as well. So would it be helpful to drop the information of those groups into chat?
It certainly would. Thank you very much.
I'll do that now.
So Malcolm, over to you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And some very moving stories. Thank you so much. And I feel very touched to be here tonight and to be in this environment on this very special day. Whoever's doing the breakout rooms, is that who's doing that? Is
Heather is doing that.
And Surinder.
Heather.
That's me.
Can we do 4s, or is that going to be a real pain for you at this stage to this?
I can do that. I've already arranged everybody into 3s with the panelists all being separate ones, but I can rearrange it. You might just need to give me a minute or two.
Yeah, I'm gonna introduce the exercise, so it'll take
Sure.
2 or 3 minutes to do that. I'm really sorry to mess it around, but I just feel like there's a bit more juice with the 4. So thank you very much.
Okay.
So
Great.
when we met to sort of take a look at the planning of this evening, and obviously it's amazing to have panelists with such a broad range of experience and such exceptional stories to tell. We realised that actually that all of us have got our stories to tell, but actually it'll be really good to make sure that there isn't just this group of experts that are or people who are, you know, in the field, but actually there's some rich sort of gold that's here among everybody who's here at this compassionate festival. And so we thought we'd break into some small groups, and I'd set you quite a sort of simple exercise, and in those small groups we'll take a use of the practice of active listening, so that we're going to do 15 minutes, which will be including all of the feedback and everything else is in there. And then we'll come back and it'll come into panel discussion. So the whole thing will be 15 minutes. And you'll have to just divide the time reasonably fairly. I don't want to make it sort of like 3 minutes each plus then sort of 80 seconds of each feedback, but just roughly so that we make sure that everyone gets looked after in that 15 minutes. So you're going to be in groups of 4. And each of you will take some time sharing, probably something like roughly sort of maybe 3 minutes apiece, and just sharing your experience. What's brought you to this festival? What's brought you to this evening? What's your experience around suicide? What support do you need? What support can you offer? So anything that sort of springs to you around this, we start to bring this, and then we'll bring that back to the session as a whole, and then take a look at how that lands with us as well. So very simply, and keep it as, you know, as relevant to you as you like. I like to keep the questions of these things quite simple. What is your experience of suicide? What supports do you need? What would you like to share with the people that you're sharing with? And your practice when each person is sharing is to really give your attention 100% to each individual, that you're really taking time to see into their souls. There's a Hindu word which is namaste, which I use a lot in groups, which is you bow to each individual, and it's basically, I honor the divine within you. So we're listening for the essence within each of us of what have we got to share around this issue. And all of us will have something to share. All of us will have had our lives touched in some way, some more powerfully and more close to home than others, but each of us have got something to say that's going to support this process. So in a moment, we're going to bring you into small groups. When we've finished in the small groups, you'll get a minute's notice when the groups are about to close. Then we'll come back into the main session, and we'll use most of that time engaging with you around what's arisen in your groups. So before we move you in, Surinder, have I given you enough time, first of all, to shift the groups around?
It's myself, and yes, it's all sorted. Nearly all groups of 4, but just a couple of 3.
Yeah, that's fine. It doesn't matter if it's a couple of 3s. That's great. And any practical questions around this before we put you into the groups? Everything clear? Take the time to really be with friends, to be with people who can receive you and who you can receive. So you're going to be teleported. I always feel like it's a bit like talk. So Andy, sorry, you have a question.
What would you like us to think about, Malcolm?
I'd like you to think about your experience of suicide, your experience of your own suicidal thoughts, possibly, your experience of having dealt with suicide, your experience of what's brought you here to this conference this evening, and anything you'd like to share about how the support you might need out there in the world, and the support that you might be able to give to that out there in the world as well. So that comes back into the large discussion. Thank you, Andy. And some of this design of this was built on my conversation with Andy this morning. So that's really helpful and appreciated. And so we'll move you into these small groups now, and we'll see you in 15 minutes back in the main session. Thank you.
Okay, I think everyone is back now. Looks like it. We may have lost one or two people. Okay, and yeah, so Heather's put me on spotlight, but I think we probably want gallery view now, Heather, because we're going to go into the main sort of free-for-all discussion.
All sorted. You're on gallery view now.
Okay. Thanks. Right. Okay. So Malcolm, do you want to say anything to kind of close that or kind of get closure on that process?
Yeah. Thank you, David. Just to say that it was, I left it with fairly sort of loose instructions, but I think what's really important is the connection with each other. And actually, for me, what that was about was connecting to others, being able to hear each other, being able to share with each other, and sort of getting a sense that we're not in this alone. And I think that that's the important thing. And you know, Zoom is a poor substitute, but it is a substitute for being able to meet face to face. And I just really want to honour the fact that there were some lovely sharings in my group, and it'd be great to hear from people about what happened in their groups and things that have been aroused. So thank you, David. I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I think that would be good. We just open it up to start with. If anybody would like to bring back any comments, any insights or any questions or anything you found particularly moving or significant from that session, and I think that will just probably naturally flow into a completely free discussion. We have about 50 minutes for that discussion. Yeah, I think Courtney and I will try to moderate this, but maybe, yeah, do you want to, if you raise a hand if you'd like to speak, and the host will unmute you. You can do that with if you use the reaction button.
Nice. Can you hear me?
Hello, yes.
Yes, yeah. I'd just like to just feedback on our session. Mine was with two ladies, Caroline and Hazel, I think. But just to say that I found it really quite refreshing, and a very comfortable space to share some very personal things, but to share in an environment that just felt quite safe and comfortable. So it's left me feeling a lot of quite relieved, actually. So I think that some of the things we talked about were quite personal to us, and some of them we might not want to share in the wider arena, but because it was a small, intimate space, it just felt really, really comfortable to talk. And for me, that's one of the key things about this agenda, really, about communication and talking, and just ensuring that people are sharing and not feeling the stigma that stops people from sharing, and often is the reason why people lose their lives in this way. So I just think it was a really good way of showing how easy it is, and it costs nothing to share in that way and to show kindness. So thank you, Malcolm, for doing that.
Yeah, thank you, and that's so true. I think, this journey that I'm on about compassion, I mean, I've been on it for a long time, but more and more, it seems to me that the essence of it, or the most important single thing, is for people to be able to speak what is going on for them and be listened to and be heard without any judgment, without any kind of agendas. It seems to be so healing. So it's wonderful to be able to create a space where people are sharing like this. Anybody else like to share any thoughts? Patricia, yes.
Yeah. I actually just wanted to say a huge thank you to Serinda for the first, when she talked at first, because what I found very helpful to me, because I've lectured psychology students who all become counsellors, I found a lot of them after I lost my son to suicide 6 years ago, that they wanted to go into counselling mode with me. But I actually just wanted to talk, and I found that people who'd gone through it it was easier to maybe talk to them just on a chat level. And that helped me. So I liked Serinda when they said, you know, they're made up of a group who've had experience of it, and therefore they're able to talk with people. And I think that's how I found the sharing. But as I've said in my chat there, sharing is caring and helps healing, definitely does. But I resonated with you as well, David, because guilt, I went through, my son wasn't diagnosed with anything. He wasn't on drugs, wasn't on alcohol, had a very analytical brain. But when I wrote my book, I started writing everything. I went over his whole life. Did he fall as a baby at 2? Had I done something to his brain? You know, did he fall in the park? And was that, you know, you go through everything.
Yes.
You know, every single moment. And I know when I shared his suicide, I did it very openly. His siblings were angry with me at first. They said, why did you tell people that it was suicide? And I said, and I think it was Chuck, was it Chukwemembra, one of the members there in our group. He said, of course, it was illegal since 1961, you know, to commit suicide. And therefore people would, you know, you couldn't be buried in churches, etc. But I think, I said to my daughter, so what did you tell people he died of? Because they assume cancer nowadays, you know, if somebody's young dies, you know. And she said, oh, right. And therefore we all talked about it openly, but I had to kind of do that for it then to be openly talked about, you know. But thank you for everybody. I've really can resonate with all the stories there, you know. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patricia. Yeah, it's very moving to hear your story as well. And I mean, you're so right, you know, it is completely different when you're talking about it to someone that's experienced it. I mean, many people showed me great kindness and compassion and were willing to hear. Now, I told the story over and over and over again, and it was, you know, the most therapeutic thing. And that experience with Malcolm is particularly powerful. In that workshop, where I found extraordinary because everyone there, it was a workshop about telling stories, and I think, you know, that is one of the most powerful ways that, you know, we can create group healing. But all of the stories there were so moving. It was just amazing. I do recommend, if you're able to, I know well, very fortunate, 2 years ago it happened in Yorkshire, this compassionate mental health gathering. It's usually in Wales, but I might make the trip next time if I'm able to, but I do recommend it. It's just a wonderful space for 3 days. It's most extraordinary that, because I don't know, Malcolm could correct me, but it seemed to me that about half the people there were people who would normally kind of be identified as practitioners, professionals, and the other half were people who would normally be identified as clients or patients, and there was absolutely no distinction made between them whatsoever. And that was really extraordinary space to be in, and it was really profoundly healing, I think, for everybody that went there. So yeah, sharing, so important. Yeah.
Hi, is it okay if I speak?
Oh yes, of course. Yeah.
Hi, yes. So I come to this from both sides. For about 40 years, I've worked with the Samaritans and trained the Samaritans here in Leeds, and totally committed to the idea of talking, of people talking to us and us supporting them in a non-judgmental, non-advice giving, accepting sort of way. And that was my practice, or I tried to make it my practice. And into this, after I'd been doing it for 20 odd years, my own mother committed suicide. She was in her 70s and killed herself 2 months after my father died. He died naturally. She was extremely dependent on him and just basically couldn't cope. And she was in Wales, they were in Wales, I was in Leeds. And so for the first time, I became the person who needed to talk and to be listened to. I took leave of absence from the Samaritans, and I was saying in a small group, it is important to talk, but my experience was I did need the right kind of listener. I did need somebody who would not tell me you're going to be okay. It's going to go away. You don't need to feel guilty. I didn't want to hear those things. I know they meant well, but I just wanted to be heard and accepted. And eventually you work it out for yourself. You find a way through, is my experience. When you've got people alongside you, metaphorically, I found that I did eventually find a way through. I think the other thing I want to say is that I have a son who is depressed, and long-term depressed, really. And of course, because of my experience with my mother, I worry. I think, is this going to happen again? I know it's sort of in my mind, and it really does affect the way I listen to him. My anxiety is not what he needs. He needs from me this non-biased listening, whereas I've got this huge urge, if he talks, to try and sort it out for him, to make it better because of the emotional attachment. And that just gets in the way, really. So I think what I'm saying is, I'm talking about the importance of compassion, of allowing people to be, allowing them to feel, and walking alongside them rather than trying to sort it.
Can I come in here, David, for a second?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think you've raised something really important, Cheryl, here, which I think is a key to working in this field, which is that people don't need fixing, they need traveling with.
Yeah.
And that's what I discovered, is the people who tried to fix me were people I ran a million miles from. But the people who could be with me in that space were the people who I really valued. And I found that some friendships lifted and became much more profound, and others dropped away. So I think what you've raised about not fixing is such a key to the work we're doing in this field.
Thank you, yes.
I have a go? People hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Andy.
It's very deep, isn't it? This need that we have just for non-judgmental presence. It's very elusive. I've had a couple of, I want to say, I've got such respect for the Samaritans and the movement and the ethos and the volunteers. I think it's a completely extraordinary community service. And I've had a couple of quite bad experiences phoning the Samaritans, and that's not about the Samaritans, really. That's just about, I think, building on what you're saying, Cheryl, really, that I was given advice when I was actively suicidal, and it was the last thing I needed. And I was sharing in my little group that I was at Beachy Head, and I decided, and I've been actively suicidal for much of the last 6 years. And I just want to share with this group, as I shared with Malcolm earlier in the day, that the worst thing that people could say to me was, think about your family.
Yeah.
Because I'd already worked out literally each one of them one by one. And I know it's hard to say and understand, because I'm very lucky to have been part of a very loving family. I met Kirsty when I was 18. I'm 52 now. We've got 2 children, Jack and Rosie. It's been a very loving relational field. What you do is you prepare by, or what I did was I prepared by working out. And it's, I actually went to work on it consciously and mindfully, why each one of them would be better off without me.
Yeah.
They're not going to feel that initially, but they will be better off because. So when somebody says to me, think about your family, and you're feeling actively suicidal, you feel like just saying, oh, fuck off, I've already done that, excuse my language. I've already done that, I've already figured out. I figured that one out, thanks. So it makes you more at risk. So it's been very elusive, actually, to find presence. Just like something like, all right, mate, I'm here, what do you need? Something like that. What's been happening? What do you need? Those are the couple of questions that would help for me. even the question, how are you, is really unhelpful to me, because I'm just like, how long have you got?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know where to start. When people say to me, how are you? I just like, I want to run a mile, because a lot of the time I can't answer that question. But if people say to me, what's been happening, mate? Sometimes I can answer that. Or what do you need? Sometimes I can answer that. Or, you know where I am. So I think it would be great if, through Compassionate Mental Health, which Malcolm's spoken about, and I'm very privileged to be part of, and through the Buddhist Centre in Leeds, and through this extraordinary constellation that's emerging, if we could think systemically around a few kind of learnings about people who are actively suicidal, and some things that instinctively we might feel are the right things to say, but actually unconsciously are really the wrong things to say. I think that would be a really good thing to come out of this amazing gathering. And my mate's saying, how do you walk with? You literally do that. You walk with. Just say, if you want to go out for a walk, mate, I'll come for a walk with you. It is literally, is there anyone around here who will walk with me? It's, you know, and I mean that literally, like shoulder to shoulder, without judgment, because it's frightening, isn't it? Suicide is frightening. And my wife lives in a story now. I've left my family home on the 18th of December because I said to Kirsty, I can't put you through this anymore. So I'm living in a flat on my own. And I've put myself much more at risk in a way, but I have to go through this. And I can't, my family is so traumatized because Kirsty, my wife, and my daughter Rosie literally live in a story now. Might it be today?
Yeah.
And, you know, it's intolerable for a family. You can't. So I've got to try and face this and look my demons in the eye, and find people who will walk with me. So the good news is I'm hiking down the River Wye on the 26th of September. I'm wild camping. It's going to take me 11 days, and I'm hiking down the River Wye with a good mate of mine. So he's going to walk with me, and I'm going to walk with him because he lost his twin brother very sadly. So that'll be good. We used to play rugby together at school. So I found somebody who will walk with me and who will camp with me. And that's literally what I've needed, somebody who will walk with me. Anyway, I've taken up quite a lot of time. Thank you.
No, thank you,
Thank you.
Andy, for the courage and openness that you've just shown, and I feel privileged to that you've shared that with us. And this is what I was hoping for from this meeting, and it's exceeding my expectations. Thank you, everybody. Patricia, you had your hand up. Did you want to respond to that?
Partly because I hope this is not too difficult for you, Andy, but I would like to say, so what does stop you? Sorry, Andy was saying you were saying you're actively suicidal. So
yeah. Well, I've not been a believer in God. The first time I was at Beachy Head, I decided, it was pouring down with rain, so there was no one up there, and I decided I wasn't going to like pause at the edge. I was going to shut the car door and just run straight off. And my mobile phone rang, and I didn't recognize the number, so I didn't pick it up. I was like floods of tears, and I'd had a very frightening drive over there, and it's, you know, it's a very scary thing to contemplate jumping off Beachy Head. But part of the mindset was that I wanted to be with others. So that's interesting. You know, when you get into that suicidal mindset, I was joining my tribe by going to Beachy Head, which might be a painful thing for folks to hear, but that's part of what goes through your mind, is where can I find others? Like, you know, there's almost a feeling of fellowship about, if I jump, I'll find others. We've been through that same journey. Anyway, so the mobile phone rang. I didn't answer it. And then some words appeared on the screen that I'd never seen before or since. And they said, Dad, it's Rosie, I need you. And she's never said exactly that form of words before. And it snapped me out of it. She didn't know where I was. Nobody did. And I just felt, and it was her boyfriend's mobile. That's why I didn't recognize the number. So I phoned her up and said, hi, Rose, it's Dad. What do you need, love? And basically, we live in a really wide road, but some universal spirit or something had smashed the wing mirror on Harry's car, and they didn't know what to do about it.
So Daddy to the rescue.
So Dad to the rescue, and then it just felt wrong to then go and jump, you know, this is what to do about the mirror, and then to go and jump off a cliff. So I drove back on that occasion and didn't tell anyone where I'd been.
Yes.
So that was the first time. But what stopped me killing myself is, so the second time was a place called Maytree. People on the call know about Maytree? Anyone? It's a non-medical residential retreat in Finsbury Park in London for actively suicidal people. It's extraordinary. As far as I know, it's still the only non-medical response to actively suicidal people in Europe. And you get to go there for 5 days and 4 nights, and you only get to go once. It's like the opposite of the mental health system where you get trapped, because you just get one shot at Maytree, and you get volunteers with you around the clock, literally. Most of the volunteers are people who've used Maytree, so most of them are people who themselves have been actively suicidal. And so the second time it was at Beachy Head, my language again, something in my mind said, oh, fuck it, phone Maytree. So I was sobbing again, and then my thought was phone Maytree, and then the Maytree experience was very, very moving. And I was then kind of talked down, but in a very, and that was then lots of contracts. So to answer your question, Patricia, lots of contracts. So can you get back to the car? Can you phone me when you're in the car? Can I phone you in half an hour? Can I phone you again in an hour? Where are you now? So it's lots of contracts that actually got me physically to Maytree 2 days later. So making lots of mini contracts with actively suicidal people seems to be a good idea. And
does that cost, I'm really being personal here, but does that cost you?
No, it's free.
Because there's more places like that, because my son, he did try to talk to people, you know, but he just, anyway, you know, he left me a letter saying why. And that gave me actually great comfort, because he told me it was nobody's fault. He'd always said, he said, I believe my brain is wired differently. And I had a lovely pathologist who did the post-mortem, and I talk about it in my book, but I wished later that I'd had his brain examined to see if there was something, because he truly believed. He used to say, I think differently from other people, Mum. And he, you know, he just head seemed to be full of a lot of kind of academic analytical stuff. So he would talk about suicide. He gave me tips to tell my clients and things, but in a kind of academic way, as if it kind of wasn't him, you know. So yes, thank you very much for sharing that, Andy. But I truly, you know, I do know that he'd made up his mind, and he was a bit bloody minded like me. We've got the bloody minded gene. And if he decided to do something, because somebody said to me, oh, if only you'd gone home earlier, you know, you would have found him, you know, before he'd done it. And I said, no, because he'd just do it the next week. If he makes up his mind about something.
Well, he was true to himself, wasn't he?
Yeah. You know?
I mean, I don't know if this feels wrong. I'm really sorry if this feels wrong for people on the call, but there's part of me that wants to say, good on him.
Yes, but people don't understand me. And I actually, he's out of pain. I am relieved. I don't need to worry about him anymore.
Exactly.
And he's with me all the time in heart and soul. I feel him all around me. And I talk to him in the present tense. You know,
it's always been the case throughout human history that some of us haven't been able to tolerate being in our skin, you know. Like, well, it will always be the case. So
thanks both very much. I'm really torn as a facilitator, because I do not want to cut people off, but at the same time, I do want to give people a chance to speak. So thank you both for sharing so, you know, so intimately. But I would like to open it up a little bit more if there's anybody else who'd like to say anything. Courtney, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch again a little bit about what Andy was saying in the what people can ask you. One of my real pet peeves is someone asking me if I'm okay when I am so clearly in distress. It's like, what do you want me to respond to that? If you can't physically see that I'm already in distress, yeah, for someone who's already in that place, it's like, how else do you want me to respond? And I think for the most people, it's just because it's what we ask, isn't it? You know, if someone's bereaved, it's like, how are you feeling? Are you okay? And people just don't know how to answer that question. And I think it's the same with mental health. It's yeah, like you say, it's now, how do we figure out that terminology, and what are those right questions to start putting forward, and just what am I trying to say? Like reframing our terminology, but accepting that terminology is going to take a while. You know, it's kind of how we've always talked about these kind of things. So it's just, again, raising awareness about that and highlighting it in these conversations of just like, that's a pet peeve for me, but it might not be for anyone else. But I can see a lot of people nodding, being like, yep, that annoys me too. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of add that and just what, yeah.
Thanks very much, Courtney. I've just been asked to remind everyone if you know, you for any reason you don't want what you've said in this meeting to be part of the recording, then please do put that in the chat and we will edit it out. Okay. Okay. I'm just looking again for any hands. Yeah, Rich.
Yeah, just a couple of sort of points. Just I can sort of empathise an element of Patricia and the story of her son, and the fact that just through my own experience of my depression, that's been there's no rhyme, reason, or rationale why I have suffered and had my depression for so long. You know, I was brought up in a caring, loving family. My parents are still together. I haven't experienced any trauma or issue, but I'm just I've been, so as I mentioned in the thing, I've been depressed for as long as I can remember, but it took me 20 odd years of suffering to get to a point to face it. And my only sort of thinking and rationale that I can understand talking to people is that I might be wired in a different way, or, you know, and it doesn't have to have a trigger or an element of trauma to for people to feel the way that they do. So that was that point. Just to Courtney point of view as well. Yeah, I do empathise with what you're saying, but also I'd like to point out that if it's an individual that you don't know and they are in distress, but it might be the wrong words for somebody, but that might also just that approach and that showing that empathy to that person may well save their life in the longer run. I think it's more of a language issue. It's just something that we've got to take on that journey and educate people widely. And I apologise for my barking dogs in the background. I think they've seen a cat. But again, I think it's that making that step and showing that compassion to somebody who is in distress, because at that point, that just showing that you may care would be enough to help and support that person that was potentially thinking or contemplating about suicide.
Thank you very much, Rich. Okay, and I'm looking around my screen now. I've got two screens here. Yeah, Andy, please.
Thanks, David. It really is humbling to listen, really. I mean, what I would say is that, you know, sort of my personal experience and professional experience would back up, or I'd very much endorse what people have been saying around the importance of presence. Because, you know, I think often we can, certainly in sort of training situations, we can be encouraging folk to talk about things. But I mean, I don't know if you're anything like me, sometimes words don't do it. And, you know, sometimes there aren't the right words, in inverted commas, or the words don't quite express what you want to say, or whether you're the helper or you're the person that needs something at that point, or both. Or also you haven't got the language to express that, to express what you're feeling. Has anyone ever felt like that? I've felt like that before. I mean, and so it's quite, it can be quite a pressure sometimes, I think, to ask someone to come up with words to express how they're feeling. I'm not saying we should make space for it, absolutely, but I think sometimes the importance of presence is understated. When actually, you know, and you're feeling that viscerally in pain, I don't know whether there's any language that can properly communicate that, you know. So I'm encouraging presence, really, and almost, you know, I've often said to people, like, you know, we need to give ourselves permission not to have to say stuff.
Yeah.
Conveying that you're with someone is so powerful, like properly with someone. That's
I
it.
think that's absolutely right, Andy. Yeah, it's not about words, and some words can be annoying, but it's that unspoken communication is much more powerful than words. It goes much deeper, and I don't know how we can kind of educate the general population in this. As I say, I'm going through maybe I didn't say this to the large group actually. I'm going through a teacher training of compassion cultivation training. It's a program that's been developed by a gentleman called Thubten Jinpa, who is the Dalai Lama's principal translator, with a team from Stanford University, and we want to offer this program at Jamming Buddhist Center Leeds, and hopefully, you know, I think that kind of contemplative background, you know, that contemplative basis of training in compassion, that allows you to get it's the intellectualizing mind, the conceptual mind that gets in the way and tries to categorize people and put people in boxes, and it's very, very automatic. But there is another kind of way of being with people, which is just purely receptive, as you say, just pure presence. And you don't need to say anything at all. It's just that you can communicate that you're there for somebody, and they can speak if they want to, or they cannot speak if they want to. Thank you for that. Yeah, Patricia again, yeah. We can't hear you.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, Patricia. I think I went to unmute you, but I think you pressed unmute at the same time, and I just had the effect of muting you again. Sorry about that.
Fine. Hi there. No, it was just to endorse what David was saying. We can't teach or train all the public. I think there's a need, whether it's Glasgow, I'm up here in Glasgow, there's a need always for people to say something, you know, and they don't need to, but it's like, are you okay? How are you? And I even had some of my clients saying that they were told by the doctor, have you not got over this yet? You know, such inappropriate, you know, and I've had to say to them, you need to let that go. You know, it's, you know, just so wrong. You know, some of them think you should just go over. How long has it been now? You know, they had a good life, they had a good innings. Oh, you've had, you know, all these inappropriate phrases, you know, and I'm fortunate I can just let it go, because I think it's just their way of trying to be kind, and it's not, you know, but.
Yeah, thank you for that. Malcolm, do you have your hand up? Or did I?
But actually, I did want to respond to that. So thank you, David. I must have had my hand up somewhere in the ethers. But I think we underestimate the power of touch, power of connection. And I think if we're looking at how we do this, you know, in the wider world, we can practice the art of presence. And Eckhart Tolle is a master at that. And so his readings are really valuable, or his YouTube videos. But it is so simple, really, at one level. It's about being with someone rather than drowning the silence and feeling your own discomfort shifted because you want it encapsulated in words. That's it.
Thanks very much, Malcolm.
I think.
Yes, Patricia, you want to come back on that? Yeah. You're muted again, I'm afraid.
So it's just that's what I studied, was touch. And I think that's what's upsetting a lot of people in lockdown, that they've not been able to touch and just be with people. You know, touch is just so important. Just a hand on your shoulder.
Thank you. We have about 15 minutes left, so I would like to try and open up a little bit more if there's anybody who hasn't spoken who would like to put anything into the mix. Anybody? Is that somebody with Andy there, or was that just waving, or did you want to say something?
I would like to say something.
Okay, please.
Hello. Hi, my name's Rachel, and I am a friend of Andy's. And it's really beautiful to hear about being with. So my job role is I am a manager of a nursing home. But actually, societally, people have forgotten how to be with. But actually, what I have found fascinating about this whole thing is, if I am with somebody that is feeling suicidal, what I would love the learning to come out and to be shared hugely is, don't say, and what will your family feel about it? Because that would be an automatic reaction. So you are actually doing to somebody. So actually, information sharing about how to be with somebody would be fabulous, because people have forgotten. And it's not just about touch, because being with can be sat in silence. It can be actively listening to what is communicated verbally and non-verbally, and actually giving people permission not to have to do something with that, but just to be. So now I'm going to be quiet, and I'm really sorry, but I had to say that.
No, don't apologize. Thank you very much. And yeah, I completely endorse what you're saying. Cheryl, I think you got your hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, just a little comment. I think to try and be kind to supporters, people who are with the suicidal, or trying to support them, what gets in the way really is, I think very often, the fact that they can't bear to hear this pain. Doesn't help the people who are feeling suicidal at all, but they're desperate for them to feel better. So they have this drive to put it right, to change things. And it's totally counterintuitive, because all they want is to have somebody metaphorically walk with them.
Thanks very much. It's a dilemma, isn't it? And how can we support the supporters as well as the people that they're trying to support? Yeah, we had a conversation about that this afternoon, actually. Yes, with Alison Murdoch. So there'll be more on that subject as well going forward. I'm looking around the room.
Claire, I believe you raised your hand if you'd like to say something.
You. Claire.
Hi David. Hi everyone. Yeah, just a couple of quick thoughts really. I think ultimately the aim of the game seems to be about connection, doesn't it? And people lacking connection. And that drives us to sometimes try to take our life, which is something I tried 20 years ago, and got myself into a resuscitation in hospital, but I did get found in time for the ambulance to come. I wasn't happy about it, but I'm glad now they found me. And I would love to know if there's any sort of groups sometimes to speak to, who actually people who've been through it but came out the other side, if you will, and maybe have something to share that might be useful for people who are going through suicide attempts or bereavement, any scope within the whole realm of what can happen under the suicide umbrella, if you will. Because I very rarely come across people who've been through it and have come and made a really good go at it, and then gone on and lived a decent life. I've a couple of friends who tried as well, but yeah, and it's not something I dwell on, to be honest, because I do find it still can get me occasionally. And all I'm trying to say is that I think the connection and the presence is the key. And people get dogs because of the fact that they are present. And they get parrots and they get all sorts of creatures in order to be able to have an extra sense of warmth and connection within their lives. So the thing that seems to be missing most, in my opinion, is a sense of getting back to the archaic and getting back to a way of being able to connect with each other that goes beyond our differences, that goes beyond all our nuances. And how we do that, one way, is through the heart, which is the compassion training that David, I know, is advocating, which is brilliant. But I guess there's many ways we can do it. And now we're in a position where we have to actually find a way to be able to do it beyond a digital screen, So the challenge is rife now that we're in, you know, this position. We have to go beyond the zeros and ones, which is it's challenging. I'll stop there. I'm tired and I'm waffling, but I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts there.
Thank you, Claire. That's brilliant. I'm actually was going to come back to you because it occurred to me, yeah, maybe we, you know, it's something that our group could look at doing, is creating some, again, groups that you were talking about. And I wanted to ask you, do you feel that it would be useful to have the more inclusive groups of people who either have been through suicide attempts themselves, or they are feelings, or they have suicidal, you know, I want to say, I don't mean tendencies, but you know, they are have that issue personally, together with people who've either been bereaved or who are supporting someone who is prone to suicidal thoughts. Would it be good to have that kind of more inclusive group, or were you just thinking to have one specifically for people that have experienced, you know, serious kind of wish or attempts to take their own life?
Well, is that a direct question to me, David?
It is, and to anybody else, yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody
Well, I'll
else
just
who want
quickly
that?
answer it just from my perspective. There's a very different quality between people who've obviously lost people from suicide, like Patricia, and people like myself who've actually tried to do it and come through. That's a very obviously different dynamic. So from my perspective, I'd be quite interested in talking to people who've actually just gone through it and come out the other side. I really would. But as I said, at the same time, it's not something I don't want to get into. I wouldn't want to get into the weekly setup or anything like that. But occasionally, because it does sometimes feel a little bit like unfinished business, because it's not something I've ever done. And this is my first time ever speaking about it publicly online with people I haven't actually properly, you know, met in the past. So yeah, and that's taken me 20 years to do. So it's a long bloody process.
Yeah, thanks again for that openness and the courage and the clarity that you're speaking about such a deep issue. Thank you, Claire. Okay, we got time for a couple more. I'm just looking around the screen there. Help me out. Anybody who hasn't spoken? Anybody who has spoken? Well, I'm going to say a few words. No, I just want to put in one more thing into, which is really very personal to me. And I'll be honest, I mean, it's a conversation that's been going this way, but I plan to speak about this. I want to put it on record. All of the medical personnel who, and the teams, the health service teams that were supporting my wife as she went through her journey, you know, they all, it seemed to me to have been very responsible, very compassionate, and very professional. But the emphasis on the pharmaceutical solution, I think, was really unhelpful. I have now, to my own satisfaction, become clear that she would not have died if she had not been prescribed SSRI antidepressants. And I just want to put that on record. I have given a long report to the investigation that followed up on my wife's death. But when I was at the Compassionate Mental Health Gathering, I heard from a number of people who had been long-term on these medications, and they all confirmed my impression. I think they are very dangerous medications for people who have suicidal tendencies, and I think there is a tendency for the medical profession to ignore very important dimensions of people's personal situation. My case, I will say what happened. I, in a period of what I can only describe as insanity, left my wife for no good reason, and it broke her heart. And 6 months later, she was hiding under a tree in a wood, having taken a huge overdose, and the helicopters were out. She survived, and we were reunited. And I have ascertained that she actually had recovered before the antidepressants that she was prescribed were taking effect. And she then overshot into extreme mania, which was incredibly distressing and I think very, very damaging to her nervous system. And she then went on this roller coaster ride, and eventually, you know, those same medications on the sheet that they give you in the hospital, it says that one of their known side effects is that they lead to suicidal thoughts. And I just want to say, please, to the medical profession, think more carefully about how you prescribe these drugs. And I think it should be a high-level review. I have heard from people, from a person working very high up in the, as a researcher who is validating psychiatric drugs in another country, who says that the standards of validation in this country are not adequate and those drugs are not safe. That's my. This is a very personal thing for me. So I'm sorry if that cuts across many of the dimensions of the conversation, but I think those who have experience of this will recognize that this is a relevant issue. Thank you, Rich, please. Yeah.
So just to follow up on that exactly, because I'm still on sertraline, which is an SSRI. It made me feel very low in the first instance, further low when I'm taking that. And I'm in a process of trying to manage myself down and effectively, with the aim to obviously come off. I've been on these for quite a few years, but one way to describe how sertraline makes me feel is in terms of its effect is it my emotions are numb. Previously, before this, I was very emotionally in good and bad ways. I was emotionally connected, but since been taking this, my emotions are to a certain extent null and void. So the impacts of these medications are strong. I mean, they have helped me personally to manage my extreme lows, but the side effects that occur are, you know, can be very extreme, to your point there, David.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rich. I mean, one of the most poignant things my wife said to me, she came off them, and she came off them too quickly. It was simply out of not knowing enough. But she'd been 6 months, she'd been in a flat depression with a maximum dose of SSRIs. And the most poignant thing she said to me was, I can't cry. And that was really, really distressing for her. So I more than resonate with what you're speaking about, Rich. My heart goes out to you, and I really hope that, you know, you'll find a way to liberate yourself from the whatever it is physiological underlying problem that means you have to take these medications. I feel sure there must be other ways that we can readjust, you know, the balance of what's going on in our bodies so that we can find a way out of this. But you know, I know that those drugs are very important for many people. I'm not saying they should never be used at all, but I do think they need to be used with greater care. And the whole medicalization, the pharmacological solution needs to be balanced with, you know, and resorted to only when it's really necessary. And there are other ways often. Anyway, we are really just about at time now, and I just want to thank everybody again for what's been a really, I think it's been a really profound conversation, incredibly important event here tonight. I want to thank our panelists, especially for coming on, but everybody who's contributed and everybody who's taken part. And it's been a real privilege to be with you here tonight. So on behalf of the Leeds Kindness Revolution, our Festival of Kindness, Compassion and Wellbeing, I'd just like to say a final thank you to everyone. And we will be following through on this. And if you want to have any further questions, you can email us on the info@kinderleeds.org, and we will respond to that, and we will be looking at ways that we can follow up and continue to make contributions to providing the support that people need and the raising of awareness around these issues. So please, yeah, continue. We've got another 2 days of the Kindness Revolution going. So tomorrow we have Kinder Communities, lots of brilliant events there. And then on Saturday's Kindness to the Planet Day, which again I'll be participating in, and some very interesting and important conversations there. And we'll be closing at 9 p.m. We're very fortunate to have, we feel very proud and very pleased that Kim Leadbeater, who is Joe Cox's sister, will be closing the festival at 9 p.m. after our conversation on the climate emergency and compassion emergency. So I hope you'll be joining us for some of those. They'll all be on the website, on the Watch Again page later if you don't manage to make those meetings. And please share this meeting as well as on Watch Again with your friends and colleagues and anybody who might be interested. Once again, thank you so much.
David, can I just check, sorry, how do we replay this? On Watch Again?
On the kindness.org, kinderleads.org website, there's a Watch Again page. So you can view all the events there afterwards. So we can all come off mute and say the traditional Zoom goodbye.
Yes, thank you, bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Kindness, compassion be with you all.
All the best.
Bye-bye. So much, everyone.
Thank you.
Really important stuff. Big up.
Thanks. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Angela.
David.
Thanks,
Malcolm.
Cheryl.
Thanks, Angela.
Thanks, Claire.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Courtney.
Surinder, Malcolm, so
Claire.
much for being
Thanks,
here.
Cheryl.
Thanks, Andy.